And we are all live. Hey, everybody, this is Don from the Vlog of Many Things.
And I'm Tom from Tabletop Tap Room and
And with us
co-host.
And
is
I'm and
Rod
I'm Rod,
Waib.
this indie
Wait,
publisher extraordinaire.
that's right. Thanks for coming on the show, Rod.
Hey, you're quite welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to finally meet you, Rob.
Likewise, likewise. Although you keep calling me Rob, I'm gonna have to give you some demerits.
Rod, excuse me.
Yeah.
Apologize. I did scheduling in a 120 bed nursing home, and it's like real important to get people's names right. And we had a lot of East African names and Haitian names, and it was brutal to make sure that I was to get all those names memorized and spell those names right. So I apologize. It is important to get people's names right, especially if you're begging them to cover your empty shifts.
No, no worries. All three of us have three-letter names. It's like we're in the Beastmaster movie. I think all of those characters have like one-syllable names,
Yep.
Dar and Zoffer. So it should be pretty easy to get us correct. We're just all single-syllable, three-letter names here.
Real simple. Well, we figure what we do is we wanted to talk a little bit about game design. You have your own game company. You are a game designer. You publish games. So you know we all do game design here. We all sit there and to different levels mess around with it. So, Rod, tell us a little bit about who are you? I mean, who are you? What exactly is Isgrim Creations? Correct?
Isegrim Creations. It's
Isgrim
actually
Creations.
it's Dutch for bear, which you can kind of see the company logo is an
Mm-hmm.
owl bear.
Hmm.
So that's what I went with. I had a previous game, Sacrosanct Games, years ago, but that when I had like a big break in game design, and then that website lapsed and someone else came in and took it up. So that's why for about 4 or 5 years ago, I think I went with Isegrim Creations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been casually designing games since 1986. That was the first game I wrote. I'll have to show you some of the. I still have screenshots with scans of all the pages of the handwritten notes. It was called Aftermath. It was kind of a conglomeration between Predator, RoboCop, and Platoon.
Oh,
Of
jeez.
course, the '80s. What are you going to do? Right, a teenager in the '80s writing your own game. So
Yeah.
that's where it all started. And then when I got back from the military in 1988 is when I really started to do this as more of a professional level. Like, by professional, I mean like hobbyist. So I put out my first book, I guess, game book, which was All This of Venom in 2002, I think. So I've been doing this for a while. It's all been a hobby game for me. Luckily, I'm very lucky to have a good day job to where this is like a hobby for me. I can have additional income.
Mm-hmm.
I go and puts into this, and I can build things out. But I've been doing this for a while. I won Die Hard Game Fans Best New Game of the Year in 2011 with Compact Heroes. I did that.
Cool.
And then last year, I had Twilight Fables Emmy nominated for Best Creature Book. So that is my particular pride and joy. I put a lot of time and effort and money into that book because I really
Hmm.
want to make sure it was done right. So I've got a lot of experience from the indie publisher side,
Mm-hmm.
not so much from the larger publisher side where you've got teams of people working for you that you send to conventions and that sort of thing. But from the indie publisher, I've got a lot of experience from those are a lot of us that are trying to get into the industry. Like there's tons of us. I get these all the time. We see them on the Facebook message boards. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, here's my first game. How do I do this? How do I publish this? How do I want to do this? Um, so I've got a lot of lessons learned that I would like to share with those folks, and I think this is a good video to share those lessons learned. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
Don and Tom, both of you, also have advice to give to starting out publishers
Yep.
and people who want to start out in this industry because it's still exploding. It's been for
Mm-hmm.
10 years well, 14 years actually with 5e and that celebrity. We all know how the game has really taken off from there. And I really want to hopefully let people know that there's life out there outside of 5e and D&D. As you guys remember in the 80s, yeah, D&D was the number one, but you opened Dragon Magazine and you saw a dozen different. You had Marvel superheroes, you had Palladium, you had all these other games that
Yeah.
we all played, and now what I'm seeing is a lot of people they only play D&D, right? They don't have that experience of like picking up a different game system, and so I'm hoping that we have an opportunity as any publishers, all of us together, to really help bring that back to the forefront. I mean, this is the opportunity, right? WotC keeps stepping on themselves, so It's like this is our opportunity to let other folks know that there's other stuff out there.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit of something called best practices because we see it all the time, people mentioning it. And usually when I see it mentioned online in a Facebook group, you usually get people asking, what is it? People offer a whole bunch of different opinions and attitudes. What do you consider best practices for game design, as an example?
There's a few. One is to really first thing is figuring out what you want to do. Do you want to build a game for other people, or do you want to build a game for yourself? Right. That's
Oh,
that's
finally.
the first thing that you got to figure out. You can't do it both ways because you're not going to please everybody, right? So you need to figure out, especially if you want to make money. Like if you want to make money, then you really need to figure out, let's build a game for other people. If you don't care about making money and you just want to build a game for yourself, then no holds barred. But if you're going to go the other way, which I see a lot of people trying to do, you've got to know what your demographic is, and you've got to get familiar with what that particular play style. Like if you're going to be publishing stuff for under the OGL for D&D, you've got to know 5e, right? You've got to know not just the rules and mechanics, but you've got to know where the 5e direction is going for this market base.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you don't care about that and you're building it for yourself, then you can put in all of your favorite darlings, all the things that you want to do, all these different rules that you think are cool. But that's one big topic that I want to go into next is being really humble as a game designer. And I think both of you are intimately familiar with certain individuals who are not humble in their game design. They think that their ideas is the best. Why can't everyone else see how awesome I am? This is so great. This rule is so awesome. And you've got to be humble to recognize that one of your favorite things may not work in a system. I think it was Sam Raimi, some movie producer, who said that a great producer has to be willing to leave their best bits on the cutting room floor. And anybody who's been playtesting, which we'll talk about in a bit, playtesting their games and running through it, you have to be willing to let some of your darling rules and mechanics that sound super cool and super awesome, leave them on the cutting room floor. Because the playtesting is where the rubber meets the road. It's where the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so to speak. And something that sounds super awesome in your head may not flow very well in practicality.
That happens in cooking sometimes, where I think this ingredient would be really good in this dish, and so I call that off-road cooking, where I just like grab something and I throw it in. I've cooked the recipe a couple of times per the recipe, but then I'm like, I want to, and I think it's going to really, and then like the wife and the kids are like, but in my head it worked well, but in reality, as you said, the proof in the pudding is in the eating. I really think, it comes down to actually trying it out and seeing if it works. And, the humility thing, I had a friend who was designing a game, and they came to me and they wanted my opinion on it. And they didn't really want my opinion. They just wanted me to endorse what they were doing. And so I gave my honest opinion. And then he kind of like, cooled in his relationship towards me because I was criticizing his baby, but I was giving him honest criticism. And I realized, he really didn't want my opinion. He just wanted me to tell him, yes, you're wonderful. It'll sell. I bought his game as a friend, to support him, even though I've never played it. Just because I was like, I've already looked at this. I already know where the flaws are. But I did, as a friend, I put my money down and I backed what my friend was doing, and I bought his game. But I know that he really was not interested in my opinion. Just a nice endorsement.
Well, John R. Peck's comment, he says, I'm grateful to all my indie developer friends who are diligently working on producing their own TTRPGs. I'm also grateful to you guys for sharing your experiences and wisdom. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I did 2 years ago. I wish I could keep doing this. 2 years ago, I had an indie publisher contest that I did. It was $1,000 prize. no strings attached. It was like, here, I'm just going to send you $1,000. You're responsible for taking care of taxes on your own. All you had to do was all these indie publishers send me what your idea is, right? And then I'll go through, and I actually ended up doing a second and third place winning as well. But I think it's important for us as indie publishers that have been doing this for a while to really try to help support those people that are starting. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because I firmly believe that the more ideas you have out there in the pool, the better product that you're going to have, the better stuff we can give the people that play. And second, and we can talk on this a little bit, the problems with like AI, right? I'm seeing way too many indie publishers think that they have to use AI art or AI writing to get anything produced and published out there.
Mm-hmm.
And Don, we've talked about it, and you've talked about it in previous videos, how that's really a big mistake, right? And let's just even set aside the moral aspect of it, right? Let's just even hold, it's a legitimate argument. Let's just set it aside for a minute. Right now, we don't know where AI is going to settle legally, right? We don't know if courts are going to rule if it's copyright infringement, if it's not, whatever. So, I know you've given this advice, Don. If you're using AI art in your products, you are potentially setting yourself up in the future that if the courts rule that it's illegal to use this, you then have to yank everything you've just done.
That's right.
And that's super costly. And that's one reason I would highly recommend against it. So one of the things that I did with this contest was like, hey, I know what it was like to start out. You don't have any money, and like maybe you can put $300 into your little adventure you're doing or whatever it is. Now, 20 years ago, it was much harder because there wasn't very much art available. But now, I mean, Drive Through RPG has got so much stock art, and it's so cheap. Dean Spencer is probably the number one person that's out there that's got a lot of cheap stock art. He's not the only one. Eric Lofgren, Misfit Studios. There's a lot of art out there that's available now. So if someone, won this $1,000 prize, and the person I gave it to was actually doing this really awesome coloring book thing they were putting together. But you can create these products without having to rely on AI. And when we talk about best practice, we talk about advice from any publishers. I know I'm beating a dead horse that you've already beaten to death, Don, but please stay away from AI art if at all possible. Just not the morality thing, but because we don't know where it's going to land. And even if you're on the fence on that, then of course you have the morality thing to fall onto too.
Well, there's another part of this that, with the AI that these new younger creators risk by using AI, and that is, let's again take the morality part out. Let's say the courts side with these plaintiffs against the AI companies. Potentially, what ends up happening then is they will open the door to allow artists to go after companies who are using AI generated art that they can show possibly has went off of their IP and such. So then what happens is, and I said this the other day or a couple weeks ago in a video, you ever be watching the news and they have those cancer commercials, mesothelioma, call the law offices of, and then underneath it says with law offices in, Delaware, Chicago, Ohio, and it lists 15 different states. Those are the kind of legal companies that these IP holders are going to hire. Not the Watsies who can hire, I'm talking about these ambulance chasing guys, and what they'll do is they'll find companies using AI, then go to their social media and say, oh, you said on January 14th that you didn't use the term "I don't care" in my post about AI. And they'll take apart their posts, and then you all of a sudden, as my attorney told me, all of a sudden two industries boom: bankruptcy and bankruptcy attorneys. Because that's exactly what's going to happen. That's what these younger or these up and coming publishing companies don't realize. Just because it's free doesn't mean you should use it.
Yeah, now I'll give full disclosure. When this first came out about 2 years ago, I think is when Midjourney first started coming about in Dolly. I used it for some spot things. And then I quickly determined that, oh my gosh, I'm listening to my artist friends, and then I'm listening to my IP lawyer friends, and this is just red flags. So I immediately went through and started replacing all that with actual, again, traditional artists. I think that mentioned Twilight Fables earlier, that had, I think, 6 or 7 spot images I had used to get it out the door. And then I went back and replaced it all, as far as I could tell. I haven't found it anymore, but if anybody notices any, please let me know and I'll go and correct it. But to that point, it's like, okay, this thing's blowing up. So now we need to go back and let's do what's right. Right? It's okay to make mistakes. That's the other big lesson I want to talk about as any publisher. It is absolutely okay to make a mistake. You don't know anything. You're starting out. Make the mistakes. That's how you learn. But have the integrity and humbleness to go back and fix it. Once you're able to admit that, hey, this was a mistake, then go back and make it right to the best of your ability. And that's going to really do you well going forward.
Well, if you can fall on your sword, people will respect that. If you say, look, I messed up. It's the people who just double down and say, no, I'm right and you all are wrong. Nobody respects that. Nobody has any respect for that.
Well, and this is something I learned is, I was on the book publishing side of it. And then I got into, in 2020, the game design, game publishing side of it. And in book publishing, it's really who you know and who you can reach out to, who you can connect with. It's kind of the same thing with game publishing. And I'll tell you what, your integrity follows you, you know. And, how many times I've gotten a message from somebody that says, hey, so-and-so reached out to me about you. Want to know, did I know who you were, or, what your character level was? And then a week or two later, I get a, PM from that person saying, I want to submit something to you. Because people will check you out. They will vet you.
Yeah. Well, especially this day and age, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's really important to have the integrity to, and the big part of integrity to me is admitting when you're wrong. Because you make gaffes. I mean, you look at me and you. In fact, I think how we met was on Twitter.
Yeah.
Because you called me out on an image that I had a buddy of mine do. And I was like, that's not AI. And you were like, no, I think that's AI. So I went to him and I was like, hey, is this AI? He's like, no. And I said, can you do me a favor? Because I want to shut this guy up on Twitter. He's just on my ass about all this. So I said, let me see at least like the screen grab of your Photoshop. That way I can throw it in his face, humble him, and he'll leave me alone. He's like, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, why? I said, oh, man, I used AI. I'm sorry. I was like, okay, we're done. You lied to me about AI. You made an ass of me on Twitter. So what did I do? I took my image down and I admitted it. I mean, hey, it's part of goes with the game.
Well, I screwed up too. I mean, our first interactions, we were like, like, oh, this guy, this thing. And then it's funny that in, social media age, I don't think you're ever going to find another group of people that argue online immediately. And then like okay, I screwed up too, man. I really like, oh, Don, Wizard Tower Games, you're the same as this other company over here that's Wizard Tower. You're like, no way, man. And then I look, I'm like, oh shit, I was wrong. This is not the same guy as this other group.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it's funny now that I think we get along relatively decent. I mean, we don't always agree on everything, but it's like how we started out is like, this guy, and then we were both.
But it falls right down to another half of the equation when you're in developing games, and that is you have to have the ability for somebody to say, hey, listen, I don't like this. I don't like your game. Because in playtesting, we have very generic forms we use in playtesting. I don't know about you, Rod. And, the only demographics we want to know is we want to know what your first name is, what your sexual orientation is, and, your age. That's all. With those three things, we can kind of get a grasp on trying to follow trends and such. And sometimes you get someone very vocal that will be very detailed, like, no, I don't like it and why. I love that because it really helps me kind of, if I'm doing a 12-person during the day, or 12 or 15 people playtesting my game, and I have 12 people playtesting that day, 7 say the same darn thing, read it and really pay attention. You have one outlier that doesn't like it, still pay attention. Be very careful because that trend may happen with one person every single game session you're running might say the same thing. So, excuse me, you got to be able to listen.
Yeah, and to segue right off of that brings up to my probably second most important thing about game design, right behind an editor, is the playtesting, right? I see a lot of people, especially small-time playtesters, they go and they start off with their family and they start off with their friends. And that's great. I think that's a needed first step. You don't want to do blind testing first. You want to get people that are friends and family that start playtesting it. Because then you start realizing like, oh, this mechanic worked really well in my head, but it's slowing down gameplay because people can't figure this out. Or it's, bogging down or it's not working as I expected. That helps identify a lot of things. It also helps identify a lot of unclear rules because the biggest trap I see writers and publishers make is we're writing all the rules, and they make perfect sense to us when we read them because we're in our head, right? We wrote it, we know what the context is. And then you give it to someone who doesn't know, and they're like, I don't understand. Does this mean I get a +1 dice to my pool, or does it mean that I get a overall? So that clarifies those things. Then once you get that done and you feel like you're kind of polished, then send it out to blind playtesters. That's where you're going to get your honest feedback. So your first group of playtesters are to get a lot of the rules clarifications, ambiguous wordings, things that just don't work. And then your second group of blind playtesters, that's the honest feedback. It's like, hey, this game kind of feels like it's all over the page. Like, what are you trying to accomplish with this game? What are you trying to do? So playtesting, please don't skimp on playtesting. But I know that's the hardest thing for any publishers to do. You go online to Facebook groups. They have playtesting Facebook groups. But getting somebody to respond to you, hey, I need this game playtest, is like near impossible. I've actually had to do paid playtesting to where I pay people to run these games. I did that at GaryCon. I'm doing it right now. I'll be doing it at Gen Con, where I'm paying game masters, hey, I'll pay you $50 an hour for your game sessions. Just it sounds like a lot of money, right? It's like, oh, a 4-hour session, that's $200 out of my pocket. But how much value am I getting back from having a 4-hour session with a group of 7 or 8 people that are blind playtesters?
See, we got lucky up here. We have several local shops, and they are just absolutely happy to playtest, to have an event on a Saturday centered around your playtesting. So here we've been lucky. But I know not everybody enjoys, game shops peppered around them either.
Well, I mean, Portland, where I'm at, is full of game shops. I mean, this is like a gaming, like, quote unquote, mecca, right? We're like little Seattle. So there's a lot of industry professionals that live in the city. I'm not going to name drop because I respect their privacy. But within just like a 5-mile block of me, there are big name award winning game industry people here. And we've got like Guardian Games now has like got 6 or 7 locations where they've branched out and bought of these things. But it's still really, really hard for some reason to find like playtesting in this city. And just in general, even online, trying to find playtesters. So I recognize and understand that for any publishers, finding playtesters is going to be a really big challenge. But please ensure that you're doing it, because otherwise you're going to put your game out in public, especially if you want people to buy it, and they're going to be like, wait a second, this isn't quite working here, or this is broken. I can exploit this rule here, and now my character just moser everybody. So playtesting, don't skimp it. And I don't want to skip ahead in topics of here, but the number one thing is the whole editing topic. So when you're ready, Don and Tom, we can talk about. I have plenty to talk about.
I am absolutely all for that because, me and Tom and Eric Kenkar have a project right now, and literally it's going to Tim Kask for editing tomorrow. I'm sending it off. So, editing is just an absolute must, period. End of story. You got to do it because I had a buddy named Hutch. He would used to carry a little yellow highlighter in his pocket or a black pen, and he'd buy a regular novel and he'd highlight all the mistakes, errors, grammatical errors, and then he'd send the publisher that book along with a letter and an invoice. And they would send him, once in a while he'd get a hit, and they'd send him his invoice back because they were just grateful because the editor might have missed several glaring things. So, editing is very critical. Go ahead.
2 anecdotal stories I think most of us might be familiar with regarding TSR. TSR, big company, right? So Dragonlance novels, the original 3 Dragonlance novels, great novels. Weiss and Hickman are great people. They're awesome authors. But if you go back and read those first novels, there's a page, I think it's in Autumn Twilight, where Flint cleaves a draconian in twain with a hauberk. Not a halberd, but a hauberk. And when I went back, and when I first read that, I didn't notice it because it was like, I didn't even know what that was, as a teenager. But I went back and read it a couple years ago. Wait a minute. How do you cut a person in half with a chainmail shirt, right? It's like, so that's something I think that stands out as far as why editing is important. But the biggest one is the infamous one is the cut and paste of mage into wizard. The wizard. I don't know if have you both of you familiar with that story?
No.
TSR had a product they were putting out, and they had referenced magic users as mages, right? So
Oh.
the editor team came back and said, "Oh, you can't have mage. You have to have like change that to wizard." So somebody decided to just do find and replace mage with wizard. So every instance of damage was the wizard instead of damage, and that got through. That got through and was made it all the way to the final steps. So that's like the cautionary tale that I like to tell folks about how it's important, why it's important to use proper editing. But I want to expand on that. I know I'm like taking over this whole conversation, so I apologize.
No, you're fine. Absolutely.
So editing, there's several layers of editing that I think are really, really important, and they need to be done in proper sequential order. The first, of course, is review your own stuff, right? You go through, read it, reread it, and you find different things that make sense. And then what I always do after that, and this helps me tremendously, and everyone I've talked to helps tremendously. In fact, I'll show you. I don't know if you can see it. So the current project I'm working on is the Gesh book, right? The Gesh role playing system, and this is the monster book I have for it. I always, even before I send it to final editors, I always have a copy printed. I just go through Lulu or whatever; they're pretty cheap, and I have a copy printed because then I go through and use that. Let's see if you can see it. It's hard to. My camera is like trying to do it. But I don't know if you can see the marks, the red pen marks in there.
Barely.
I go through and everything, and then you find tons of other errors, and you write those down. You can detect mistakes in print for a lot of people easier than you can rereading it on a screen.
Yes.
So that's the second step. That's the second step of vetting. Then when you're done doing all that, then you send it off to other people. Then have other people read it. Don't skip that step. It's like the rules clarification, right? You have to have other fresh eyes look at this, preferably professional editors, but if not, anybody that you can find, and have them read things and see if it makes sense to them. And then you're pretty safe. Editors are expensive. I think I paid $3,500 for just a grammar editor for Twilight Fables, and that wasn't even talking about the continuity editing. But just so editors can be expensive. I understand if people can't afford that are indie publishers, but at the very least, we all know people we can send this to and say, "Hey, do you mind us reading this and give it a one shot and make sure it's not done?"
Well, and it's the editing that a lot of people skimp on because they don't have the money for it.
Yeah.
And I have your best practices document open up right here.
Oh.
Okay. And you say something, line number 1, and we're hitting it right now. And that is you say recognize your limitations. And point 1, how much can you invest? And that's a big thing because with me, because it's not when I'm talking to somebody, I'll get people once in a while say, well, how do I get in the business? Any suggestions? And I always tell them this. I go, my question is not so much how much do you have to invest? What happens when you start selling product? How much are you willing to reinvest into your business of what you are making? And then on top of that, not only money, that's a big expense, but do you really want to do this? Because if you really want to do this, it's going to take an awful lot of your time. And I'm talking about someone who says, I want to be a game publisher or a book publisher, because they pretty much run hand in hand, the gambit of things you have to do. If you tell me that you want to become a game publisher or a book publisher full time, I look at them right now and I say, got one question for you. And I can use this weekend. Tomorrow, you got family stuff? They say yes. I'll say, what happens if you got a deadline you got to meet? You willing to give up the stuff with your family?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll have people look at me and go, right there, don't do it. Because I'm a firm believer that, you got to get in there, you got to grind, you got to be able to sit there, put the time in, but also it also falls in the cost of this is a business that's not cheap, i.e., you got to go ahead and get an editor. If you don't have the skills, you got to be able to lay the book out. You got to, again, not saying that you have to spend a lot of money, because you made a good point earlier, Rod. You said, maybe somebody. Everybody knows somebody. And that's, again, where the integrity kind of kicks in, because do you have the ability to reach out to somebody and say, hey, Rod, I got a problem. What? I got a deadline on something. And you can look at me and say, hey, listen, I can help you out, or I can't help you out. I'm on my own deadline. I get it all the time because we do printing and binding here. You know, people going, I got a deadline. I just need 20 copies. Can you help me out? You know, type thing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's
I agree with you 100% that you've made the comment about like when someone tells you they want to be a game publisher. In my head, I'm thinking my first question would be, well, what's your daytime job, right?
yeah.
Because it's like that saying, how do you end up with $1 million in the RPG industry? You start out with two.
Mhm.
It's unless you a combination of luck and talent, and I think most importantly perseverance, you're not going to make a lot of money in this industry, right? People look at me like, I think the Kickstarter for Twilight Fables was like $56,000. I'm like, oh, that's
Mhm.
great. That's like a pretty good success for a book. And I tell them, well, but I put 60,000 into it. Art alone was 30,000, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So I do this for the love of the hobby because I love it, and it would be nice to be able to make extra money for it. But if someone wants to become a publisher, and this is another, I think, like best practice of this, right? You need to be aware realistically what expectations are. People are seeing all these $1 million Kickstarters and thinking, man, all I need to do is just go viral. I just need to have,
Yeah.
like Questing Beast or like one of those folks that got these YouTube channels with 50,000 followers just to mention it on the channel. I'll go viral. That's not realistic going to happen, right? You have to have realistic expectations that you may only get 300, 400, 500 backers. I think for an indie publisher, that's not a bigger name like Cold Press or those, or even, N Worlds, their whole section with Level Up. If you can get 500 backers, that is a really good success. And
Mm.
so you need to extrapolate from that. How much am I going to get in profit from this? And then that's really kind of what my budget should be if you're not going to spend any more money on extra stuff. Because don't count on going viral. You might as well be counting on winning the lottery ticket. It's just, chances are it's not going to happen. I don't have a lot of great experience, or not great experience, great results with social media ads like Facebook ads and Google ads. The rate of return isn't that great. Everyone I've talked to says the rate of return on those ads isn't that great. Um,
Mm.
Well,
you get,
advertising. You
yeah,
bring a good point up. Um, I'm a fan of a certain kind of advertising. It's unconventional. And when I had my book publishing operation, I'm not joking. I started off in a small room, a desk with a chair in front of me. And within a year and a half, we had over 400 authors, signed authors. I did it with billboards on the
oh,
road.
that's kind of unusual.
You can get a billboard. Well, I'm talking about 2008, 2009, but even now you can get a billboard for 800-900 a month. And in the advertising spectrum, 800-900 bucks, you get it on a highway, like on the side of a major freeway, like which is what I like to nail. You've got 11,000 cars a day driving by it. You know,
No.
and
Yeah,
that's 11. And if you do the math with it, I got really good results. I mean, literally, the guy walked out and said, I'll do a billboard for you." He emailed me. I think it was like a Thursday. He emailed me, said, "Your billboard's up." And I was like, "Okay, good." And I luckily stopped in the office on Saturday. And I stopped in the office on Saturday. My voicemail was full.
Mm.
oh, wow, because that's not
Yeah.
really targeted. So yeah, I
Hmm.
don't want to. I'm going to shift gears a little bit just based on a comment you have from St. Cuthbert there about two adventure models ready to be formatted that are
Yep.
written with maps. Another best practice that I really highly suggest to folks that are publishing out. A lot of stuff is through PDF digital, right? Like, I mean, it's pretty much where you start is do everything. You don't have to worry about print costs. I really, really recommend that when you put out your product versus in PDF, don't just go with generic settings of exporting with InDesign or whatever you're using, because it
Yes.
downsamples those images down to like 72 DPI or maybe 96 DPI. If you're using maps in your adventure right there, St. Cuthbert, I critically recommend that you either attach separately outside of that PDF additional PDFs that are high resolution maps, because your buyers, your customers are going to want to use those maps in like Roll20 or Foundry or whatever
Yep.
else. They're going to want to have those things as high res digital. Another thing that I highly recommend, which I found surprisingly popular when I did with Why the Fables, is it remove the background. Put a background free copy of your PDF. It doesn't. I mean, if you're using like InDesign, it's a 5-second job. You just go to your
Yep.
master pages and delete those two master pages out.
Yep.
Because a lot of folks want to print pages. They want to print the whole book. They just want to print relevant pages. And if you've got fancy parchment paper and all these other stuff on it, it's harder to print out and folks to read. So have a print-friendly version, and then have a high-resolution version for all of your maps. And even better, if you're doing an adventure with your own created monsters and those type of things, in that zip file that you're selling to people, have tokens, have things, make it easy for your customers to be able to access and, more importantly, use your product, right? We want them to use what we're creating. So the way we do that is making it easy for folks. Another thing that if you can do it, but I understand it takes a lot more effort, is to put out a reader-friendly version, which sometimes I just do an RTF version in large font. I've had a lot of feedback from folks. They gave back to me and says, man, I'm so glad that you did this, because now I can highlight specific text things instead of out of a PDF. I can see it. We're all getting older, right? I don't know about you, but now I have to have reading glasses when I'm, reading things up. So I can't, if I pulled out the original player's handbook that I've had, I have to have glasses and I go hold it back here, right? So be cognizant of the people that are using your products and try to make it easy for them to use it. So I didn't mean to hijack that, but I saw St. Cuthbert's comment there about integrating maps. So I really wanted to remind folks that when you're putting together these digital products, don't just have these like lower medium resolution maps in the back of the book and that's it. You need to have additional versions for folks.
Now, I'm a little guilty of this thing in that you get people who are starting out, and you get this mindset of like, I'll just do everything myself. Where I started out in the fan magazine space doing the writing, and was working with an editor who was like, we have to have illustrations for every single article, so he wouldn't publish. And I'm like, I got like 7 articles that are that are in the queue waiting to get published, and we're not going to publish till he's got it. So I started drawing, and had to attending sketch groups every week, and just to get better. And it took 3 hours a week going to sketch group every single week, going on portrait night sometimes, so it'd be more hours to just get raw skill. And sometimes you try to do everything, and then you end up not doing a lot of things well. And I think I tried to do that. I tried to go that route. Well, I'll just do it. Somebody needs to do it. I'll do it. And you end up not doing it well. And I think there's a real value to finding a team and listening to them.
Absolutely.
And getting other people's expertise, because you just can't necessarily do everything well.
Yeah, you're not going to. I think it's physically impossible. You don't have the time to learn all these applications, right? Someone might be great at layout design and InDesign and those, but are you really that great of an artist and a writer and an editor and a marketer? I mean, I don't have time to learn all those skills and be good at it. I'm right there with you, Tom, and I'm guilty of that. Especially I go back and look at my early stuff from like 10, 20 years ago when I did everything myself. And it's like, oh, it's as the young folks say today, it's cringe, right? Just eat it right out of here. I'm sure I'm making everyone just roll their eyes right now, like, oh my God, here's this old white guy talking about cringe and yeet and sus and mid and all these other terms that kids are using. But yeah, I 100% am behind you on that. You have to rely on others who are the experts. And I'd like to expand on that, if you don't mind, just a little bit.
Sure. No,
it's not just expertise from technical expertise, right? It's not just, I need to get someone who's a really good editor to do the editing and look at the editing thing. There have been so many studies that have shown that the more diverse group of people that you have sharing their ideas, the better overall product you're going to have, because you're getting these outside viewpoints that you might not have thought of, you might have taken for granted, or like things that don't impact us that we don't think about. It could be impacting a bunch of other people. It's like, oh my gosh, then maybe we should have this in the game, or maybe this should be out of the game because of the way that's impacting it. I joked a little bit about this before this call. And I don't want to get on. I'm not going to get on a soapbox. Don't worry. Last thing people want to hear is a bunch of white guys talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion. We should be giving that platform to those folks so they can have their own experiences being shared instead of us speaking for them, because Lord knows we do enough of those already. But I only bring this up to say, go out. I highly, highly recommend. We talk about best practices. make the effort to meet and talk with people that don't look like you, that don't go to the same church as you, that don't hang out in the same circles as you, and honestly listen to what people are saying, because then things start falling in the puzzle pieces all fall into place when you're creating these games. Like, oh my gosh, this person just came up with this really great idea of how to implement this, and I may have never even have heard or thought about it if I didn't make the effort and get out of my own echo chamber. I think that's a really big problem in that our society as a whole has been doing, and social media is a big problem with this. We get in echo chambers. I'm just as guilty, right? We get in these siloed echo chambers, so we're only hearing ideas that reinforce our biases. So get out of these echo chambers, even as a designer and a publisher, and that way you're going to learn about your markets, right? You're going to learn about your consumers and your potential customers. You're going to learn about things that they like and that they want to see. And more often than not, if you're willing to actually just listen to them and stop trying to take over the conversation, then I think we'll all grow for it. And that's all I'm going to say about that topic. I'm not going to.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I love live, because it's nice talking with you two, but it's really nice when we get a lot of people in the chat and a lot of people start peppering with ideas, opinions, and such. And, you know, with my publishing company, I had 9 full-time staff in-house, 11 contractors of various types, art, children's book art, that type of thing. And I'm gonna tell you something, you hit the nail on the head. You have to be able to listen to your people. You have to be able to, and they have to be able to feel comfortable enough with you being the boss that they can knock on your door and they can walk in and say, you said something earlier, Don, you're wrong. And my response was always sitting back and going, why? Because that's what I told my kids. It's like, if you have to have the ability to admit that you're wrong. You have to be able to see that you're wrong, and to listen to other people. Because I'll tell you something: when you get a group of like 9 women, in front of your desk, and they all start peppering with ideas about how we can do this better and that better, you not only have your marketer or your event coordinator who knows what she's doing, giving you great input. You got people that can throw in their ideas because they're not marketing. They're not marketers, but maybe they have a unique idea that's kind of outside the box. So I agree with you 100%. I think that if you surround yourself with good people, you listen to your good people, good things will happen.
So I'm gonna throw the gauntlet down and issue a challenge to you, Don and Tom, because this is your show, right? Is to have other people on that don't look like me, to talk about it and get those perspectives, right? Because we can sit here and talk till we're blue in the face about what we think is right and everything else, but we've traditionally been holding that platform for ages. So I joked with you, Tom, earlier. I think your wife was laughing in the background when you were talking about, like, I think it was the one video where, like, oh, D&D's always really been inclusive and everything from the beginning, and it was like, well, have your wives on and see what their experiences are, right? Instead of just us. I think we can all learn from it, and I understand the irony in me saying that because I'm also part of this whole group that's doing that. So it's just getting shared ideas. It's not only getting shared ideas; it's ensuring other people have a platform to be able to share their ideas. You don't have to listen to them. You don't have to agree with it, but at least give people the platform and the respect of considering their opinion.
Well, I agree, and that's been kind of like and we've talked about this, is the whole purpose of it not being, Wizard Tower Games or Tabletop Tap Room, is the fact that, and we joke about this, is there's going to be times that he's going to advocate for something, him, and I'm going to disagree with him, and that's the whole point of this. It's kind of a yin and yang, but more importantly, I agree, getting people on here who maybe don't agree with us on a topic, or maybe we're talking about a topic and they vehemently disagree with us. And I really want to be able to offer that. I mean, like early on, you talk about interviewing other people. I interviewed Polly Kidd. I mean, that's how I met Polly Kidd, and in talking with her,
she's great.
Yeah,
a ton of knowledge too, and she, her record is like stellar, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, working with her is just to sit down and have like a video chat or to have a Discord chat with her, and just that knowledge. It's like Tim Cass, the knowledge behind them.
Mhm.
You know, just
Yeah.
soak it up and just listen, because you know, when you listen, great things can happen, I think.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, that kind of runs up there, tying it all back together to best practice as a publisher. Just, you know, to recap this whole conversation is you got great ideas, go outside of your bubble, go outside of your friends, see what that impact is of people that aren't traditionally part of your circles and see what their feedback is, because it's a great way to mine ideas. You'll be surprised. A little bit, you know, more my background. I've been a leader of people in one role or another for probably 30 years, whether it was coaching, the military, project management, whatever. And there's universal good traits about leaders, whether you're a supervisor or manager or whatever. And that's, if you give people, if you treat them like their opinion matters and that their input matters and that they matter, then they're more willing to invest themselves in what you're doing.
Hmm.
And so if you talk to people, and even if you don't, you know, invoke their ideas or implement or whatever, if you just give people, hey, I'm going to consider what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
and especially important regarding playtesting, and this goes back to we talked about being humble. Listen to what people are saying with playtesting. Your product's going to be a million times better if you just humble yourself. Don't think you know everything. Don't get caught up in like, oh, this person's a bad person or this person's a bad person. Or what are they saying? Does it have value? Let's have it to implement and go forward. There's a saying, I want to say it was either Eisenhower or Patton, I can't remember, that said leadership is like a string. If you lay out a piece of string and you pull it, the string follows you wherever you go. But if you try to push from behind, it just gets in a big mess and it doesn't go. So, and I always like that quote because, like, if you want to be a leader, whether it's leading a project, a role playing game, whatever, you have to set the standard of what to expect going forward for the people working with you and for you, because they won't respect you, they won't do their best job if you're not willing to like walk the talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tying into that, I've hired dozens of artists over the last 30 years. And one of the best practices I have for those people hiring artists, you have to trust the artist, right? They're the expert, not me. I tell them that kind of like, this is what I want, right? This is kind of what I'm expecting, what I want. I'm not talking contractual terms. I'm talking about like what you're trying to get as a commission. But you have to give them some freeway. I love to give my artists some leeway to say, you know what, it's in your mind. You're the creative person. What do you think works well? And sometimes I'll
Mm-hmm.
say, well, let's shift this composition over here, right? Or what
Mhm.
you're asking for is not going to work well on this page. And so the other piece of advice to publishers, especially indie publishers, is trust your people. Like you mentioned earlier, if you have an artist, you're hiring artists, respect their time. Don't ever stiff an artist. Never. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care if you run short of money unexpectedly. You got to communicate that and be open and honest about it, and then try to make it right. But because you mentioned earlier, your reputation follows you, so treat your artists right, pay them a fair wage, and listen to them and give them leeway, and let their own creative juices create something. Because I guarantee you that what they create is going to be a better image than what you probably thought of if you let them have
Mm-hmm.
that freedom.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been my struggle with the fan magazines is we couldn't pay artists. So it was you know, if you had and we've gotten lucky. We've had professional artists donate their time and their work. We've had semi-professional artists. You know, we've had people just amateurs who did great work, and you know, you've got to respect that. And so, you know, I figured out early on that I never wanted to burn out. If I've got a professional artist who's been donating stuff to the fan magazine, I never want to burn that relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
if they tell me, you know, I'm slammed right now, I really can't, good. It's all good, but I keep the communication open, you know, with them. It's you know, no worries. I'm going to ask somebody else, but you know, thanks, and let them know that you appreciate them, and you know, for that reason, we've had some long running relationships with artists.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to respect. I could never pay them because it was a fan, you know, thing, but just work so hard to maintain those relationships. You never want to burn an artist. They're so critical to what we do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good artists and good editors.
in this industry, it's a small industry, right? So relationships matter. I mean, you don't want to be the next Ken Whitman, right? No,
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows who that is. And I know Ken's still out there doing stuff, but I imagine it's much harder for him now to try to produce things and products and to sell products because of things that happened in the past.
He's into he's into acting now.
Oh well, whatever it's still gonna be harder, right? Because once you got that, reputation matters and counts. And to go along with that, the other best practice I had, I don't think this one's on the list, but equally important is you gotta have a thick skin, right?
Oh yes.
You can't. You're gonna have people that are going to give you a bad review, right? It's an unfair bad review. That's gonna happen for whatever reason. Maybe they saw something they know about you on Facebook, whatever. They decided to do it. This is especially true if you put a product out as like a pay what you want or a free product. They don't have to put any money to it. They're going to download it and then they're going to like bomb your review. That's totally okay. We all have those stories on there. You can't let that get to you. You just have to understand this person, for whatever reason, they're not like whenever I did, fine, whatever, and kind of move on. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself doxing somebody and mailing them a bag of poop, right? And then you're going to end up in court.
Yep.
So just don't let it spiral out of control. Take it for what it is. Take the bad review. See if you can learn something from it. And if not, then just ignore it and don't worry about it.
Well, there's another aspect to that to me, and that is you have to be able to fall, skin your knees, get back up, wipe them off, and push forward. You have to be able to trip up. And I know a lot of people online who they get a bad series of reviews and they say I'm done, or they'll make a mistake or something doesn't go right for them. And I tell people, I don't care how well laid your plans are, and I'll admit, D20 delving, I'm being proactive. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to make this right now. I'm so damn busy. I'll order it. Well, the unexpected happens, and you have to be able to, when that unexpected event hits, is you have to be able to, you get mad, you do, I'm human, but you have to be able to step back, take a deep breath and go, okay, let me think about this straight and figure out a workaround or a solution to the problem. And if that solution does not involve getting that product out there for your clients, you got to communicate it,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially you two. I mean, you keep having the small group of who could be the same person, who couldn't be the same person, or the same three people just constantly bombard YouTube reviews. And like you mentioned Polly Kid earlier, right? I don't know how she does it because she gets bombarded with this hate speech over and over and over again. And I have so much respect for Polly because she's just like living her life, right? She's like, this is my life. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to enjoy it. And she puts up with a ton of crap. So you kind of have to, right? I remember years ago, I did a basic expert multi-cook, basic expert conversion called Westwater, which was like set in the Wild West, right? And it was very clear up front that's what it was about. And like the very first review I got, someone gave it a 1-star review and said, no one wants to play a Wild West game in fantasy D&D. This is a stupid product. And I'm like, you didn't even like look at it. It was like just the concept. Like, well, if you didn't like the concept, then why did you even bother like looking it up or downloading it? Why didn't you just like skip it? So that's what you're going to get as a publisher. A lot of reviews like that. You just got to let it wash off your back and go forward, because ultimately, who are you making the game for? And this goes back to what I said at the very beginning of this meeting. Are you making it for yourself? Or are you making it for a whole bunch of other people? Most of us are doing it because we love the hobby. We love doing it. That's why I do it. I do it because I love doing it. It means the world to me when I get this positive feedback from people saying, man, this is so awesome. I enjoyed doing it. That's just bonus. But I do it for myself. I'm proud with what I did. I made mistakes along the way, work on correcting them. But no bad review is going to be like, okay, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, Mr. Potato Head, or whatever your avatar username is. I wish you the best in life and hope that you don't have so much negativity. And, so then it's just, move forward.
Well, go ahead, Tom.
You have to, nobody comes out of the egg fully formed. In the science classroom, we've got eggs in an incubator and the chicks have hatched. That's not a chicken. That's a chick. Nobody comes out of the egg fully formed. And I made mistakes when I started my YouTube channel, and all right, well, we need better microphone. We need to address some sound issues. We need to, I had to learn about green screen. I actually got a green screen, and instead of just using the virtual green screen, It's different things, and you have to constantly push. Well, part of that's the process of me of looking at my video and going, what can I do better here? But also just paying attention to what somebody criticizes you for. Oh, well, maybe I hadn't noticed that. Maybe I should now pay attention to that. And I think that's what you're saying, Rod, that you just can't be thick-skinned. I'm thin-skinned. You got to be thicker-skinned.
Yeah, and I mean that's what the industry is, right? You're going to get hit with any fandom, especially in this industry, is very entrenched. So you got to make sure that you're okay with a lot of that. I'm trying to move forward onto other best practice and stuff. I know we're running short of time, but one thing I wanted to really talk about, and I know Don, you're definitely gonna roll your eyes at this one, is domestic versus overseas manufacture.
Yes.
I think most indie publishers don't really, I don't mean this mean, but don't have the first clue of the process of having something manufactured overseas and then going through the distribution channels. We see like, oh, well, it cost me $11 to print this book in the States, but it cost me only like $7 to print it in China. So I'm going to go through China. Folks, please, if you hear anything else, please do your homework on this, right? And Don, I know you're going to back me up on this. You've done a lot more than I have. Not only do you have to go through like the printing to that company, you've got tremendous shipping costs that are going to be associated with that. Is that they ship everything over, and that shipping is either going to a hub or a distributor or to you. So it gets like shipped like 3 different times before it actually lands the hands of where it needs to go. It's got to go through customs. That costs money. It costs a lot. It takes a lot of time to go through all that stuff. So just because you see something cheaper to print in China doesn't mean it's going to be your best option, especially if it means 6-month delays, a year delay, and by the time all the shipping and storage costs and everything else are done, you're actually paying more. So if you're gonna plan, if you're doing it, I mean, you generally use a small indie publisher out there. If you're planning on doing a Kickstarter and you're planning on having anything manufactured overseas, your delivery date better be like a year out from where you think it's going to be. Because all these other things that are going to be tied onto it. And like, more than anybody, Don, I'm preaching to the choir here. You can have something sitting in customs for 3 months. And now, by the way, you're being charged for it while it's sitting there in storage.
Well, there's the other part I tell people about importation. That's a lot of things people don't realize is that, and this happened to me actually dealing with another small publisher as I was on Facebook a couple weeks ago. And a young guy was on tabletop role-playing game group where me and you were talking about the AI thing. And he posted his Game Pro as a card product. And I reached out to him via PO. I was like, hey, I'm a publisher. I'd love to support you because I thought it was a really cool concept. And I said, so how do I order one? He's like, oh, here's my PayPal. And it was his name. And I went, well, no, I'd rather buy it through your company. And he's like, no, I use my personal PayPal for my business. and that's kind of like a little bit of a weird crossover subject. But my advice also is to people is if you're going to do this for a living, file an LLC. An LLC. I mean, it's under $100 in probably 49 of the 50 states. And you probably do the paperwork yourself. I mean, in Michigan, it's $65 and it's a 1-page form. It takes you less than 5 minutes to fill it out. It's so super simple information. But, be cognizant of what you're selling online because DriveThruRPG and PayPal, they're letting the IRS know how much you're selling. And if you get lucky, I mean, people go, well, what's the big deal if I sell, it's only a couple $1,000 extra dollars. Well, even if you're just doing this for fun and you're making a couple $3,000 a year, well, guess what? The IRS still wants their, whatever percentage that you fall under in your bracket, they're going to want their cut. Your local state, like Michigan, we have to pay sales tax on internet purchases now in Michigan. So that's 6%. And I just see so many publishers, not doing the legalities behind a publishing company.
Well, and the bookkeeping to go along with that on that point. You got to have your bookkeeping on par, right? You got to know your expenses. You got to know your invoices, everything. Because come tax time, you're going to want all that. One, because of any potential write-offs you have for costs you incurred. But yeah, I see as some people do that too. Like I only made $500 this year on drive-thru. I'm not going to worry about it. You better, because even if it's not penalized that hard, you're going to have to spend so much time going through sending paperwork and addendums and so on. Just do it right the first time, right?
Yeah.
My grandpa used to always say that, like, just do it right the first time.
Yep.
And then
And I have another big piece of advice for anybody out there watching this video that, and I think you'll agree with me, Rod, and I know Tom will too, is keep your damn politics off your business page. Nobody cares who you voted for. Nobody cares what side of the aisle you support. Keep it off there, because no matter what side of the aisle in Congress you support, half your customers support the other aisle. And if you start going either anti-Biden or anti-Trump stuff or anti-whatever candidate this, keep in mind, yeah, you're going to have a lot of likes and hearts and amen, brother, comments, but you got a whole slew of people, and I've seen this before. I went on a page and went, am I on a business page or is this a politics page? And they'll just plaster with their social views. So keep your social views off. Because, a compatriot of mine I worked for briefly a few years ago used to get online quite a bit. And I used to tell him, if someone walked up to you with a Pro XX shirt on, are you going to take their money? Yeah, of course you are. So why alienate them before they even get to your booth? Or before they get to your website.
I'm going to push back just a little bit on that. Not a lot, but just a little.
No,
I think that's great. That's great advice if your goal is to like maximize your profit, right? Is to keep all that. So I think if I want to maximize sales and do that's absolutely wonderful advice. But that being said, I don't chagrin companies that do want to take some sort of like their own company morality stance. Like a lot of companies do, like, we're going to be a green company, or we're going to be, I'm not going to, like, if I said, hey, you know what, I don't care if I lose sales to somebody who's wearing a KKK hood, that's okay with me. I don't give a shit. Keep your money. I don't want it. But to that point, there's a difference between putting out, like, having a statement, like some companies do, like, this is, we firmly support this, whatever. And then having, like, every single day sharing a post from one political side or the other. So I hear what you're saying, and I think there's a lot of validity in that. But I also think that it's okay if a company is willing to say, I'm gonna adhere to my personal values as long as I'm okay with not getting the business from this other particular group or being associated with that. And we see that happen a lot too. Like, there are some companies that are like, you know what, keep your money. If you're marching down the street in a Nazi hood, then I don't want your money. And I think that's okay for companies to do that, because it's what you want to support.
Well, I mean, I think I see where you're coming from, because we even went ahead. We even took, a stance by even putting a special page on our website. We have a thing called inclusivity statement.
Yeah.
But the thing is what I'm talking about mainly is the people who use up. I'll back off that what I said a little bit and put it maybe a little different way. Is if your politics are going to be if your content, whether it be political or social, is going to be purposely, I want to put this correctly, but if you're going to making a group feel unwelcome, then I think you should not involve yourself. Now, unless, I mean, if you're out there going, you know what, we don't support the pro-Nazi marches that happened, in this state, or like in Michigan, we had a school shooting a couple of years back, and 11 kids were killed not 2 hours from where I'm at. We made a post about it on Wizard Tower Games in support of, and we caused some shit from people because they mistook something we said as being anti-Second Amendment or whatever. So I'm not saying things like that. I'm talking about, and I'm not going to name drop here, but there's a certain group of companies out there, sadly, that really go, and they do it in a negative way. They target a group of people and they do it maliciously. That's the type of content I think that you really should not be putting on your page as a business.
Again, I think it comes down to like what you're going to be okay with. Like, before you even start a business, you need to identify that, right? Like, who am I doing this for? Again, that question that we talked way at the beginning. Who am I doing this for? Is it for like customers or everybody, or is it for like me? And if you're okay with limiting your exposure or sales, whatever, back yourself out. If your goal is to maximize your profit as much as possible, then they should probably follow your advice and say, you know what, let's keep pretty much, agnostic, business agnostic. Like, but I do understand what you're saying. Like, I have my Twitter account is actually under like my company name, right? And I almost never post anything political on Twitter. It's never. My Facebook account, as you know, I post more often things that are more personal to me and my own, values and support. So I do hear what you're saying. I don't think it's as quite as black and white as you like initially had set it up to be. Maybe I misunderstood or misrepresented what you heard, but that would be mine.
Well,
Well,
see, go ahead, Tom.
I just I was thinking of an analogy to this discussion, and in religious circles, you have things that people who go to seminary really care about, and so you sometimes want to come back to the local congregation and be like, and the local congregation don't care. They just don't care.
Yeah.
And it. Not only do they don't care, it's not what they need. And so, sometimes you get all up in your head, with that. And you were talking earlier about echo chambers, and I was thinking, yeah, my God, this was my seminary experience because it was a school of 100 students. So I mean, talk about an echo chamber, and occasionally they'd let somebody come speak in chapel who was just like from left field, and eyebrows, you'd see eyebrows going up on some of the faculty, like, yeah, we ain't having him back. But it was always good. I always found some of that to be really refreshing, to get those outside viewpoints. Just or just some missionary from a part of the world who was doing something so radically different. That it was like, wow, that's really a different way of thinking outside the box. This idea that I'm going to eliminate people and say, you know what, if you're woke, don't even buy my product, or if you're conservative, don't even buy. I don't like that because I just feel like we have an awful lot of that, and I don't feel like I don't think that's good. And we were driving. The good wife and I were driving today, and there was an ad on the radio about I forget the organization's name, but it was about just come together and talk. Love Has No Labels, I think it was the ad, and that it's about learning to understand somebody else's point of view, and there was a lot of this when I lived in Massachusetts, where it was just the politics were so one way, and it really irritated me. They were like, well, you have to be a Democrat. If you're not a Democrat, you're stupid. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll be stupid. And so I registered as an independent. It bothered me, this whole let's just put people down, and I just feel like that's not well served. And so that's why particularly Dawn and I are on the same page about I don't want to exclude anybody. I have libertarian friends. I have family that are Republicans. I have family that are Democrats. I'm not interested in excluding anybody. Let's be nice to each other. And that's where I'm kind of at. It's not so much that I want to maximize the money I'm making. It's that I'm kind of tired of excluding people and the hate and can we, I don't know.
There's a lot I learned a lot of lessons through life, and not just to myself, but I talk to counselors and everything else. I always, not to get too much information, but I think that like therapy and counselors should be like considered preventive healthcare. Not that anything's like wrong with me or broke with me, but you get like an expert who's a third party view into like what you're doing. You get a lot of great advice that way, and a lot of the advice that comes through is like, just try understanding where other people are coming from, what their experiences are, because we all experience things differently. I'm sure, for all three of us have probably been in arguments with our significant others at some point, right? Mm-hmm. And their experience is different from our experience. We swear we heard them say something. They swear they heard us say this other thing. And it doesn't matter how much you try talking with them, our experiences are different. So if we step back and say, okay, well, let me try to understand your experience. Like, where are you coming from for this? What shaped that experience? I think a lot can be that way. I mean, I know we've gone into this whole political thing. I just want to do one statement. I think it was Barry Goldwater that made a comment in 1984, maybe. He said the problem And for those who don't know, Barry Goldwater is like, staunch conservative Reagan Republican. The whole,
Yeah.
So Google Barry Goldwater. But he said that the difficulty in government is that you have to make compromise and do things you don't agree with in order to have it function. And he gave a warning to a certain demographic of people if they took hold of the government, it would shut everything down because they would entrench in this position and be unwilling to budge or move from this position. And I think that's what we've seen in our current government, right? How many crap is going on because people are like, I refuse to do anything unless you do everything that I want, and then nothing gets done.
Well, you see it even in game groups. I mean, there's been several game groups I've walked away from because somebody will just make an innocuous comment like, I played this module and I really enjoy it. And then underneath is this vitriol of, how dare you like that game and for this reason or that module for this reason or that reason. Or, you know, they'll talk, like a guy will make a comment about, he'll talk about the adventure module and people come underneath him and say, that never happened in that module. And I'll talk. I look at it like you mentioned about people not remembering a conversation the way it was. I give a good example. We've all watched 007 James Bond, right?
Yeah.
Remember the big character Jaws?
Oh yeah.
Okay, remember the scene where he was injured and the little ponytail German blonde girl rescued him?
Yep.
She had denture or braces when I was a little. I remember watching as a kid because he had Jaws. Well, the new modern 007, that same TV or movie, she doesn't have braces. And the maker of the movie came out and said, we never had her with braces. I remember that pointedly because it was kind of like a play on him,
Yeah, but I guess my point is just that we all have to make judgments from our own beliefs and values. Yeah. And like I personally, I don't have a problem if someone says they enjoy playing Fatal. I don't have a problem making a judgment about them, what kind of person they are, or if they enjoy playing a game where they're glorifying like, oh man, these Nazis are super cool people. Let's just the game is an extension of their own like. Then yeah, it's like I'm not talking about like reenactors stuff. I'm talking about people that really get into it and enjoy it. Oh yeah, let's put down all these other just talk about racist jokes and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, and there's some games like that I don't have a problem with. And maybe I shouldn't judge people that way, but like I'm never gonna play a game from Varg Dickerson or whatever his name is, that my Frog or whatever it is, because it's like there are so many dog whistles and red flags and blatant stuff that this guy has said and put in there. It's like, if you're enjoying that game, then I'm at least going to question like what's good about it that you enjoy. And if the response is, well, because it's none of this like woke or PC stuff, well, that's not a reason to like a game, because you can do that with any game. Mm-hmm. Like what specifically is that? So I hear what you're saying, but I'm also not going to begrudge people that are making their own value judgments of what they're going to accept and not accept, as long as they are kind about it to other people. Like, don't go on Facebook rants about your own person. We've seen that a lot, and that's just off-putting.
Yeah.
I know we're running out of time. I just want to say one thing really, really fast. And I know that you come from a military family, Don. We know what weekend this is. This is Memorial Day weekend. And so I just want to call out Sergeant Droziak, CW Halverson, and Captain Edmondson, which are three of my buddies I had that they passed overseas while serving. And so I want to call out to all my fellow military vets that are out there. I'm with you. I know what you're going through. I know it's tough for a lot of folks out there for this weekend. So you got friends, reach out to them, talk to them, and don't be afraid. So I just want to throw that in there.
Thanks. Appreciate that. I agree. Well, one last thing, and unless Tom has something, I have a question for you. If you can give one spiel of advice here to anyone watching this going, I want to publish games, what would you tell them?
Oh, is that we're telling me? You're asking me?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking Rod.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Be patient. Be invested in it yourself. Like if you're doing a game that you don't, this is a hobby of passion, right? So if you're not passionate about doing it, don't do it. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with others, and learn. It's really, if the one recurring theme we've had this whole conversation is reach out to other people and talk to them about what their ideas and opinions are, because that's how you're going to learn and do things, and get a better success, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now, St. Cuthbert says, do you all have any thoughts on writers using a pen name on their work, or should they use their real name? What's your opinion on that,
question.
Rod? I think it's okay. I think it's up to the individual. Like I don't worry about it. Now, my name is super easy to Google because there's like one in the world that's got my first and last name. But I understand that certain people that have maybe treated hostilely based upon, a demographic, a group they belong to, may want to use like a pen name and not have that, immediate, like a third of the population start attacking them with ad hominem that have nothing to do with what they've actually done. So I'm not going to begrudge somebody that does use a pen name, but I personally don't have a problem using mine.
Tom, you have any final questions or anything here for Rod?
Well, I just, in all of this, I think back to an interview of an author who did a biography of Ronald Reagan. And, Reagan was pretty far on one side of the spectrum, but and it was a story of a Democrat had been elected to the House of Representatives, and he got an interview with Reagan, and then he self-deprecatingly referred to, yeah, but we're enemies. And Reagan said, not after 5 o'clock. And the guy was like, huh? And he says, after 5 o'clock, we have a beer together. And I always thought that was the best thing of, all right, yeah, he was to one side of the spectrum, but he was willing to meet with people across the spectrum and let's sit down, let's have a beer, let's talk. And I just think more communication is almost always the answer. In almost anything, talking to people, finding out what it is that they're passionate about. Why are you passionate about this thing here? And, and try to understand that. And then maybe you can work with that. Maybe you can work with them and you might find you become, influenced.
I hear you, Tom, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. But I would also caution to say that it's easy for some people who aren't being impacted by one person's decisions to say, let's just have a beer, versus someone who may have suffered a lot under that person. I wouldn't expect them to say, oh, have a beer. You just
well,
so
yeah.
I think we need to be cognizant that that's a great general advice, but then we also need to understand how these groups have interacted with each other, and then understanding that piece of it. I think is really important.
There's something really interesting.
I would not advocate for Dawn to go and have a beer with a certain somebody in North Carolina. You know who I'm referring to without referring to them, because that person has done a lot of damage. I'm talking in general because I think most people in general are good people on some level.
It's kind of funny about the beer, because I'll tell you something that I did and it worked is every Friday we got off, my ladies left at 4 o'clock on a Friday, but at noon we would go a couple doors down to a bar called the Copper. It was an old fashioned saloon and they had hot dogs, fries, and beer. And I call it Liquid Lunch Friday. And the goal was there is we could talk about anything. Nobody was the boss. Nobody was the office manager. We could just eat some hot dogs, eat some French fries, drink some cold beer. And when we were done, if we got done at 1 o'clock, they got paid till 4 still. They went home. And I'll tell you something, at those Liquid Lunch Fridays, some of the best ideas came out with those ladies that worked for me, because it was just an environment. Everyone was casual. There was no formality.
Yeah.
We're not in the business. We're out in an outside environment enjoying ourselves. And it took 3 or 4 Liquid Lunch Fridays before they started getting the idea that they really could be blunt and honest with ideas and feedback and such. So the whole, sitting down with somebody, I agree that, I'm not going to sit down with a certain guy out of North Carolina. Absolutely not. But there may be somebody else out there that maybe like again, me and Rod, here we are, we're on a show right now talking with each other. But I'll guarantee you, if you would ask me that night that you challenged me, you're going to have that guy in your show be like, the hell I am. He's a jerk. And you're probably going, look at this jerk in Michigan, man, posting freaking AI and trying to argue with me. It's not. Again, just You were willing to listen to me. I took what you said, even though it was critical, and I went, wait a minute here. The ability to listen to somebody else's opinion that and they may be checking you, is follow through with it, because listen to, not, people can be jerks. I mean, like real jerks, like cussing and everything, but
we've got to give them the platform, Don. We got to give those folks the platform. I did an experiment the other day. My significant other, she told me that I should probably do this on a business call. She goes, on your next conference call at work, count how many times a man interrupts a woman and how many times a woman interrupts a man. And so I did that. There were 47 times that a man had interrupted a woman and 6 times that the woman interrupted the man. And I'm not like, people are like, oh my God, here he goes going woke. Whatever. This has nothing to do with being woke or anything else. This is just like data, right? So we need to be able to recognize, if we're expecting and telling people to, like, listen to other people, we should be listening to each other, then we need to make sure everyone has the platform to be able to speak. And the factual data that I saw was that our culture quite isn't like that. We're so used to being in charge and running the show that we don't notice. It feels like something's being taken away from us when we're letting someone else speak for a minute. And so that's what I would caution to anybody who's doing any publishing or working with a team or anything else, is kind of like compartmentalize it into like, how much time am I talking versus how much time is everyone else talking? And think to yourself, I challenge everybody watching this video now, the next time you're on a conference call, like, count that up. Count up how many times that kind of stuff happens. And we don't think about it because it's like day-to-day stuff to us. So that's what I would challenge to your statement that you just said, Donna. Listening is important, but we have to give folks the platform to be able to give us that message.
Good. Well, you know what? At that one, I think we're going to leave it at that.
All right.
It's been an hour and 20 minutes. We like to keep it about an hour, but this was different. Again, we start getting feedback from the audience, and we get a good guest like you've been talking and giving feedback and ideas. Yeah, that's what we want to do on this show, I think.
All right. Anytime, of course, I'm willing to talk about shop and game ideas and things like that. But again, I throw the challenge down, invite more folks in. Like, I think Polly would be a wealth of information to have her as a guest on this. She's there from like day one almost, and really knows your stuff. And just, kind of break out. I think we would be better as a hobby as a whole, the more that we support each other and have fun playing games. That's what we're all here for, right? Just have fun playing. If you're not having fun designing a game, playing a game, publishing a game, then reevaluate what you're doing, because that's what we should.
That's great advice.
Yep. And at that advice, we're going to go ahead and let it go then, guys.
All right, thanks.
Well, Rod, thank you very much. Seriously, anytime. Love to have you back on the show. Maybe in a few weeks, have you back on. We kind of continue on a different kind of stretch, talk about something a little different. You know what I mean? It was great. It was great talking to you, seriously.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Tom.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Rod.
Like I said, this is the first time you guys ever chatted, even on PM?
Yeah.
Oh, well, hey. See,
it feels like you meet somebody when you can see you look them in the face, look them in the eye.
Yeah.
You chat online a lot, but it's not the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, again, Rod, thank you very much for tuning in. I will go ahead, once this live goes off, I will sit there, list your website or your social media in the description of the video down below, so people can kind of reach out to you, check out your store that's up and everything. Also, everybody, if you go ahead and hit a like and subscribe. If you are currently watching through Tabletop Taproom, make sure you like and subscribe Tom, or if you're watching through Wizard Tower Games, hit a like and subscribe with us. So this is Don.
And this is Tom.
And Rod.
And this is the Vlog of Many Things signing off. Everybody have a good night.
Good night.